I never imagined the day would come when my own son would stand in the middle of my living room and speak to me like I owed him something. Like the 30 years I spent raising him meant nothing at all. It was an ordinary Wednesday evening. I was sitting in my armchair reading when I heard the front door. My son Connor and his wife Diane walked straight in without knocking, without a phone call, without so much as a greeting. Connor didn't sit down. He stood in the center of the room, arms folded, jaw tight, and said it plainly. "Dad, I need $80,000, and I need it now." Diane stood slightly behind him, watching me with an expression that held no warmth at all. They were both waiting. The tone made the nature of the visit perfectly clear. This wasn't a conversation. It was a collection. I looked at them both for a long, quiet moment. Then I smiled and said, "All right." Connor looked surprised, then visibly relieved. They left my house that evening convinced they had gotten exactly what they came for. If this is your first time watching Behind Dad, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This channel is built around real, honest stories from fathers who have faced betrayal, disrespect, and manipulation from their own families, and who eventually found the courage to respond with dignity. Stay with me, because this story is far from over. What Connor and Diane didn't know was that I had been preparing quietly for months. While they drove home that night, no doubt congratulating themselves, I was already on the phone with my attorney and financial advisor. Everything I needed was already in place. They believed they were heading toward an easy victory. What they were actually moving toward was the most clarifying moment of their lives. I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to argue or plead or send long emotional messages trying to make them understand. I was going to let the situation speak for itself. For too long, Connor had operated under the assumption that I was a man who could be worn down, that if he pushed long enough or hard enough, I would eventually hand over whatever he needed to make the tension go away. What he never accounted for was how carefully I had been watching, and how methodically I had been protecting myself and those who actually deserved protection. Over the preceding months, I had transferred my savings, investments, and property into an irrevocable trust designated entirely for my 2 grandchildren. I had documented every disrespectful exchange, messages, voicemails, conversations. I had collected it all and organized it clearly. And I had already been in communication with the appropriate authorities regarding certain financial activities Connor had been involved in that I could no longer ignore in good conscience. Several hours after they left, I saw headlights through the front window. Connor's car pulled slowly up the driveway. He and Diane climbed out looking energized, expectant, the way people look when they believe they're about to get what they want. They rang the doorbell, then again. When I didn't answer, they noticed the cardboard box sitting on the porch, their names written across the top in clear block letters. Connor laughed. "See? I told you. He always comes through." Diane smiled and helped him open it right there under the porch light. The moment they looked inside, the street went loud. Diane recoiled and let go of the box like something inside it had burned her. Connor's face drained completely. He stood there frozen, staring down at what I had prepared for them. There was no cash, no check, no wire confirmation. The first document in the box was a formal letter from my attorney confirming the transfer of all my assets and property into a permanent, irrevocable trust for my grandchildren. Connor and Diane's names had been removed from any future consideration entirely. A second document detailed the formal report I had filed with authorities regarding Connor's past financial dealings. And beneath those, printed clearly, time-stamped, and organized, were screenshots of their private messages and recorded voice notes. In those messages, they had called me a burden. They had mapped out a plan to place me in a care facility once they had secured the money. They had laughed about how they would control everything after I was no longer in a position to resist. They had spoken about me with a casual contempt that I suspect they never believed I would see. I had seen all of it, and I had kept every word. They started pounding on the front door with both fists. Connor was shouting loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Open the door! What is this? What did you do?" Diane was crying. Not the quiet kind, but the desperate kind that comes when something irreversible has just become real. I waited. I stood on my side of the door and let the silence do what it needed to do. Then, after several minutes, I opened it, just enough to face them. I kept my voice calm and level. "You came to this house and demanded a significant sum of money with anger and entitlement. I decided to give you something that will serve you far better than money ever could. The full truth of where things stand and the decisions I've already made." Connor tried to deflect immediately. He said it was work stress. He said they hadn't meant any of it. He said things had gotten out of hand and he was sorry. But the messages in that box weren't written in a moment of stress. They were written with intention, over time, between two people who had made a decision about who I was to them and what I was worth. I told them both clearly that the trust was permanent and legally structured to remain so. The report I had filed was already in the hands of the appropriate people. Whatever plan they had assembled to extract money from me and then remove me from my own life had already collapsed before they'd ever reached the front door. That evening they left with nothing except the weight of what they had put into motion. The box went with them. Everything in it was their problem now. The weeks that followed were not easy, but they were necessary. Connor called repeatedly, leaving messages that ranged from anger to grief to something that occasionally resembled genuine remorse. Diane appeared at my door alone one afternoon, attempting to reframe what had happened as a misunderstanding, suggesting that my response was an act of cruelty toward my own child. I remained steady. I told her what I believed to be true, that respect cannot be extracted under pressure. It has to be built through consistent honesty and genuine care. When it isn't, there are consequences. Not as punishment, but as reality. I shifted my energy toward my grandchildren. We established a rhythm together. Weekend visits, fishing, long walks, evening films, and the kind of unhurried conversation that children remember when they're grown. They became the clearest source of real joy in my days. Meanwhile, the pressure Connor and Diane had accumulated began to fracture things between them. The version of their lives that had depended on a financial cushion they hadn't earned was no longer available to them. The extended family, in time, came to understand more of the story than they had before. I want to be clear about my intentions. I did not do this to ruin my son. I did it to stop a situation that was heading somewhere deeply damaging, for me, for my grandchildren, and ultimately for him. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is remove the mechanism that allows destructive behavior to continue unchallenged. For the first time in years, I felt something settle inside me. I began traveling, places I had postponed for no good reason. I joined a local golf club. I started volunteering with a mentorship program for young men who needed an older, steadier voice in their lives. I was living according to my own values and my own pace, not in a constant state of management and appeasement. 6 months have passed since that evening on the porch. Connor and Diane have had to make significant adjustments. The car is gone. They moved to a smaller place. Connor is working a straightforward job and learning, perhaps for the first time, what it means to live within his actual means. He has started coming by occasionally, not with a request, but simply to sit and talk. The conversations are different now, more careful, more honest. I've told him that I'm willing to rebuild something between us, but only on the foundation of mutual respect and demonstrated change. Nothing else will hold. My grandchildren are flourishing. They have stability, and they know that their grandfather is a constant in their lives, regardless of what happens around them. This experience taught me something I should perhaps have understood earlier. Love that flows in only one direction eventually exhausts itself. There are moments in a parent's life when the most responsible act is to allow your child to encounter the weight of their own choices. Not to wound them, but to give them the kind of clarity that comfort and concession never could. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. I'd genuinely like to hear your answer to this. If you had been standing where I was standing, what would you have put in that box? Have you ever been taken advantage of or spoken about with contempt by someone you gave everything to? Your stories matter, and they remind other fathers that they are not alone in what they've faced. Share this video with any father navigating something similar, and if you want more honest, grounded stories from fathers who chose to protect their dignity and their future, make sure you're subscribed to Behind Dad with notifications on. I'm Robert Thompson, and this was my story. Never allow someone to mistake your patience for permission or your generosity for weakness. Your peace, your dignity, and everything you have spent your life building, they matter. Guard them accordingly. Stay strong, stay clear, and stay true to yourself. Thank you for watching all the way through. I'll see you in the next one.